We're keeping Michele with us, and we're also joined now by Adrianna Granlund and Jennifer Reyes. You've both survived life on the streets, very fortunately, and you've turned your lives around. So what I'd like you to do is share some of your story with us, and especially what we need to understand about the realities of homelessness before we can talk about meaningful solutions. Maybe Adrianna, you can start with your story.
Okay, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Adrianna. It's so good to be a part of this today, to come before you and tell my story. I was an addict for 20 years. Methamphetamine, alcohol, just everyday user. And I found myself with 2 children, domestic violence relationship, and unable to cope with daily life. And so I turned to substance abuse. And having 2 children in substance abuse, you know, and being a single mom after leaving a domestic violence relationship just doesn't, I mean, where do you turn? So I turned to Section 8. I turned to, you know, free housing. And what I was given basically at that point was a place to use to fuel my drug use on a daily basis. And, you know, and then I would try to get my life together for periods of time, right? Small periods of time I could get clean, but long enough to, you know, if I needed to move, I could find housing. And once I was granted housing, I would quickly, you know, sustain a place to live with my children and then quickly relapse again. So it was what is known as a chronic relapser. And, you know, leaving a domestic violence relationship, finding out that I had stage 3 colon cancer, getting a CPS case, so many things had happened to me that for any normal human being, you would just want to give up. But I found a place called St. John's. In this place, you're able to get therapy, counseling. You don't have to think about clothing, food, you know, where you're going to sleep at night, how to pay your bills. Instead, you're able to save money and reunify with my children ultimately, because I found myself homeless due to my addiction for years, you know, staying in and out of hotels and in shelters and things like that. So finally being able to get into a place like St. John's, where I wasn't just given housing, which would have just then therefore fueled my addiction, or a place where I could just use every day, I was able to focus on what was important, and that was healing myself and what was going on inside of me that made me want to use on a daily basis. And I was able to take a look at those traumas that I've been through in a domestic violence relationship and the traumas that come with homelessness as well, and focus on my mental health and well-being, and, you know, being a mother to my children, and had the structure on a daily basis to get up every day, to get out of bed, shower, go to work every day, and be a mother to my children, ultimately, and a functioning person in society. So after 20 years of addiction to methamphetamine and, you know, 10-year addiction to alcohol, and after going through 4 stints in rehab, I have found myself in St. John's, reunified with my children, clean and sober 4.5 years later, with the career of my dreams as a drug and alcohol counselor. I just bought a house this year, and my dream car, and my life is absolutely amazing.
So Jennifer, why don't you tell us some of your story?
Well, I'm a single mother of 4, and I dealt with a long time. I call them, I don't want to say necessarily mental illness, but disabilities of depression, PTSD, anxiety, which also led to me in my teenage years becoming an addict of alcohol and marijuana dependently every day. I was also a high school dropout, so I felt like, not that I was not uneducated, but not educated enough to really understand my disabilities. Further on, I tried different jobs. Being a mother of 4, it was hard to always keep those jobs, which add a lot more stress to my life, which also kept me using, drinking, and smoking as well. But just dealing with things that I really wasn't familiar with. I wasn't familiar that the anxiety was keeping me from kind of like what Adriana said, being productive and being able to stay focused and wanting to sleep all day and ready to quit because things would feel overwhelmed and not feeling at my best. And so by the time I reached 40 years old, I feel like the mental illness of my disabilities got the best of me. And at that point, I just spiraled downhill to the point where I lost my house. I became more dependent on my marijuana and alcohol usage. We were sleeping in cars, we were sleeping in motels, we were sleeping in people's houses. And I didn't realize that there was stuff that I needed to deal with on the inside of me, which was dealing with my depression and anxiety and PTSD. So I went through a lot of different local programs out here where you eat, like Mary House, Loaves and Fishes and stuff, and they support you with different little products. And I heard about St. John's as well. I didn't really think I was going to be able to get into the program because me being able to stay at one thing for a period of time was always a challenge for me because of my anxiety and not really believing in myself. I really was not my best friend, I guess you can say, because I always doubted that I would be able to accomplish these things.
So why is a place like St. John so few and far between?
Well, I just want to bring up one point to underscore what Adriana and Jennifer so well articulated, and that is that, you know, I often say and said at St. John's, right, they don't know what they don't know. We can't expect people who have, you know, lived with addicted parents or lived in a domestic violence situation or lived with parents who were and grandparents who were generationally dependent. We can't expect them to know how to be anything else than what they've experienced. There's actually a disease and an addiction and mental illness, another layer of that disease called anosognosia, and it's a deficit of self-awareness. Adriana mentioned that after rehab, she was able to choose St. John's, but Adriana in an addicted mind frame where she wasn't aware of the challenges the addiction was creating for her, or Jennifer, who wasn't aware of the challenges that the mental health, the anxiety was creating for her, they would not choose, services because they're just not in that mindset, right?